We're following the latest in Iran, where more protests are expected. Demonstrations erupted over the weekend in Tehran and then spread to more cities. Business owners are demanding economic reforms and regime change. Iran's currency has weakened as the economy suffers. For more on this now, we want to bring in Behnam Ben Taleblu. He's a research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he's with me now from Washington. Behnam, thanks for joining us. So,
my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Listen, can you sort of take us through sort of the latest round of protests? We've covered this before, but why are these protests so significant?
Well, these protests, which began Sunday/Monday, are the latest outpouring of discontent by the society against the state, and more importantly, they're by bazaris, men, merchants of the lower middle class who work in the realm of the economy and engage in trade. And it was the bazaar class, particularly the Tehran Grand Bazaar, that sided with the clergy in 1978, 1979, helped overthrow the late Shah and basically install the Islamic Republic. And when this class, which is part of the regime's social base, rises up, you know there's a problem.
So then they have seen in the past their ability to force government to change. What is the expectation in terms of how the powers that be will deal with them? Will we see change?
Well, that's actually a fascinating question, because over the past 2 decades, since the death of Khomeini, the founding father of the Islamic Revolution, the bazaar's business and political clout has been eclipsed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, their numerous members, veterans, banks, and businesses that are basically running the Iranian state from behind the scenes. So these institutions like the bazaar have already been eclipsed. So they are pouring out into the streets as a measure of their frustration, as well as to protest the economic situation. It'll again be up to the Iranian people, but for the past 8 months, different segments of Iranian society have been pouring out to contest the state based on select issues. And it's impossible to say that none of this is political, because this is all distinctly political.
Now, I know that the protests have been going on for a while now. They started well before the U.S. decided to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. But does that decision have an impact here?
I think President Trump's campaign of financial warfare, basically restoring the 4 pieces of legislation that contain nuclear sanctions on Iran, as well as escalating the pace of Treasury Department designations on the Islamic Republic, will have an effect on the Iranian economy. The goal, of course, is to get Iran back to the negotiating table and to get a genuinely comprehensive deal that deals with all elements of the Iranian threat, be it nuclear, missile, military, terrorism, human rights, and everything else. The JCPOA nuclear deal, unfortunately, did not do that.
But in terms of the frustration that people are feeling about the economy, that has nothing, there's no real connection with the withdrawal from the deal, because that hasn't really, they haven't felt that yet, have they?
You know, it's the elites of the Islamic Republic that have, for 40 years have been saying, our bad economy is a product of Western sanctions. Well, Western sanctions were not this heavy in 1979. They were not even this heavy in 2006, when Iran's nuclear file was first referred to the Security Council. There was only 2010 to 2013, what I call the sanctions incubation period, that began to have a net effect on Iran's economy. These sanctions are heavy. They will have an effect on Iran's economy, on Iran's oil exports in particular, as well as Iranian banking and business. But it's the Islamic Republic that has continued to put regime interest ahead of national interest. And these sanctions will force them to a choice again.
So the other thing that the protesters are asking the government to do is to pull out of Syria, focus on the domestic issues, less on the international issues and the regional issues. Is that likely to happen?
At present juncture, no, but there is sustained pressure on the regime from below about its regional portfolio in ways that we've never seen before. Usually the formula death to blank is only chattered by the hardest of the hardliners in Iran, but now people who actually dislike the regime are targeting causes of the regime. They're saying death to Syria, death to Palestine, not because they don't like the Syrians or Palestinians, but because they don't like how the Islamic Republic is putting its wars in Syria and Palestine ahead of Iran's national interest. You could say this is something of a renaissance for Iranian nationalism.
Well, we will be watching closely. Behnam, thanks for giving us a little bit of context to understand what's happening. Behnam Ben Taleblu in Washington, thank you.
My pleasure.